Hello everybody, my name is Ravi again. I wanted to come up with another video to create a simple first project in ASP.NET Core, right? In my last video, I talked a whole lot about the theory behind ASP.NET Core, the installation process, installing the SDK, and whatnot. In this video, I particularly want to talk about, show you a demo of like creating your very first project and creating a simple page. Maybe we'll put a form in it, and then we click a few buttons and get some output, and let's get rolling from that standpoint, right? I'm assuming you followed the last video and you understood downloading this SDK, and you also installed the Visual Studio on your machine. We talked about the free edition, the community edition. So let's get into this. So as you can see on my screen here, I opened up the Visual Studio 2019, and I have an option to create a new project. So I'm going to create a new project, and I'm going to choose ASP.NET Core Web Application, hit Next. I'm going to say simple first project, something like that, hit Create button. I think this is using the 3.0 SDK, so actually 3.1, so that's where you can set your SDK. You have other options as well, but I'll be using the latest long-term support flavor from .NET Core, which is 3.1. So I'm going to use a traditional MVC because this is where we're going to start, but we're going to transition into other things like Razor down the road, but for now this is good enough. Hit Create, so it creates your first project. And we're going to wait for it to spin up the project structure. So here we go. So we got the first project. You can collapse it, and you can expand it. And basically you have the three MVC, as the name stands. M is for models, V is for views, and C is for controls. These are the three folders that are at the heart of this template. The framework we've chosen, the pattern we've chosen is MVC. So this is what we need to be seeing. And Visual Studio created this boilerplate code for us. So I just want to quickly go over the controllers. Controllers are the brains behind how we handled an HTTP request that's coming in to the application. So the controller, a controller gets assigned by the ASP.NET Core dispatcher. Right, when an HTTP incoming request comes in, it'll pick a write controller and a write action method inside of it. So today we only have one controller inside of the controllers folder, but if you can add more controllers to this, obviously. And then each controller that this one is home controller will have a matching folder inside the views folder. So if you open this, you have home here too. So basically, if you add another controller called navigation controller, you'll see another folder. I mean, you won't see it automatically. You have to add it, something called navigation. That's by convention. So if you follow the convention, then ASP.NET Core can easily find the target view for you. And by the way, view this is where you put all your pages, HTML pages that you want to render to the browser. So we have home controller. So home controller is responsible. So it has a bunch of action methods here. So it has the index action method, privacy, and an error. So it has three action methods. A controller is nothing but a class, right? And these action methods are just C# methods, and they return iAction result. So index is a method, and it returns a view. So that means it returns HTML page. So what's the name of the page? By convention, it matches the exact name as the action method. So you have to go under home and look for index here. So whatever is inside of here is the HTML that's rendered to the browser. But wait, it doesn't have the HTML tag and the head, the body, and all of that is not present. So all of that is abstracted away from this, and those are present in the layout. If you open the layout folder, this is where you will see all of it. So layout is kind of shared between all the views. Obviously, you can create multiple layouts, but for the purpose of the demo, I think every view has the same layout, which is assigned here in the view start. So layout has all the plumbing that you need. That doesn't change, but the only dynamic part here is the body of that is dynamic. So that gets replaced by whatever the actual view is. And notice that the view also has an extension, CS_HTML. That's CS stands for C#, so it's HTML is the output, but the reason why you have CS here is you can mix and match C# and HTML together, right? So, for example, look at this one. It's called a razor syntax. So you use the @ symbol, and the @ symbol in a curly brace. This is a block. It's a razor block. So inside of this, you can put C# in here. So that's the background for the views. We talked about views and the controllers, and the models is where you put your classes in here. This is what represents the data that the HTML page will represent, or the HTML page will post back to the server. Like, for example, if you're filling up a form, which we'll see in this demo, and the form is represented by the form data is represented by from a C# class, and these are called view models. So I like to suffix them with view model. And this is what's posted back to your controller, and the controller will process them depending on the logic, and then it'll render the right view back to the browser. So that's the background. All right, let's go ahead and create a. So right now, let's go ahead and run this. Let's see what's the default boilerplate output from ASP.NET Core. I apologize, my machine is not the fastest machine. So I just have to wait for it to. I'll probably later edit this. It's still taking time. Make sure that it's done building. Build started, so it's wow. It's going to take a while. Apologize, guys. I need to get a faster machine, especially with the recording happening on the side. It's just going to be a long process. Anyway, it started building. It finished building. There are no issues, and now it also fires up an HTTP request for you automatically. And this is the default landing page. So which controller did it choose? Which action method did it choose? So that's set up in the in your default section. So I already showed that in the last video, but if you go back to the startup class, this is where you'll see at the bottom the default route has home as a controller and index is the action. So by default, it runs that code, and what you'll see is the output, this one here. Other page is not required. So this is the default, the simple first project, and home and privacy. Those are the tabs, and you have this going on. So we want to modify this page, right? So let's go ahead and go to that index.cshtml and get rid of a lot of this. I'm just going to get rid of the p tag and leave the anchor tag there. By the way, this is HTML. I'm assuming you're familiar with HTML. So anchor tag is the one that's responsible for producing a link to click to get to other pages. So I'm also going to get rid of the href here. Instead, I will use a tag helper. It's called ASP action, and let me say, let's create a link that can allow you to add, for example, a recipe, right? Your favorite recipe. I'm going to call add recipe, right? And then I'll put some text in here. Add recipe. So let me also get rid of the p tag here, and leave the rest alone. So now, if you run this, you will see you'll see add recipe as a link. By the way, tag helpers are part of the ASP.NET Core framework, which spit the href for you automatically, right? So it's a very handy way. So it's less code, so it's very convenient for us to use ASP action. If you don't use this, you have to write your own URL, right? So by using this, the runtime will look for an action method called add recipe. So today, if you go back to home controller, we don't have add recipe anywhere. We have index, privacy, and error. That's it. So it's not going to match an add recipe, and we're going to get an error. Or we don't get any result. So we'll find out. But by doing this, it knows which controller to go to, which action method to fire. Since you're already in the home folder, it will only look in the home controller. So that's by convention. So let's go back to the page again. Now look, we have add recipe here, right? So by clicking this, see, the page cannot be found because it looked at the home controller and add recipe, and this doesn't exist yet. So let's fix that. Let's go back to the home controller. I'm going to copy one of these methods and I'm going to paste that back again. So this one here, I'm going to give it the exact name. I think we call it add recipe. So now, and it's saying we're returning a view, so the request comes back here, and then we are not doing any processing. And then we directly return a view. But what view are we returning? We don't mention a view name. By convention, the name of the view will be exactly equal to the name of the action method. So add recipe. It looks for this view. So go ahead and open the Solution Explorer. Stop the page, stop running the app so we can add more files to it. And go to the views in the home folder, Control-C and Control-V that. So that'll add another view and change the name to that add recipe. So we added a view called add recipe. Now this view, just to make sure we have the title correct, let's call it add recipe as well. And then here, add your favorite recipe. So how do you add your favorite recipe? We don't need a link anymore here. So it gets redirected to this page because this is what the controller is telling it to do, right? And this is where you will build a form to add a recipe. So a form is just, we basically use a form tag and with the form controls and stuff like that as submit button. I'm going to show you that, but let's make sure we got this working. So if you run this app again, I want to make sure we click on that button and we get that. I think what I should be doing going forward is just hit Control F5, so I don't want to debug it. I just basically want to hit run it without debugging. So Control F5 is a shortcut for that. So here's a landing page again. And we should see the link to add a recipe shortly here. Come on. Wow. I do need a better computer. It is an i7, but I don't think the clock speed is good enough to handle multi-threading very well. So the page, we have add recipe. Now when you click it, see you got add your favorite recipe. We don't have the form there yet, right? So we haven't built the form yet, but you understand the routing. So also, if you to debug this a little bit further, so you can go back to your controller again. You put a breakpoint here, right? So, and you put another breakpoint here. So when you go ahead to the web page again, if you refresh it, the first, so it goes back here because the URL is already set to this. But let's go step back a little bit. Go to home page. Home means it comes here. The default action method is index, so it comes and stops here. See, the execution stopped here. And now you're returning a view. That means it finds an exact view with the same name as index. And we've already seen that. And that's what this page is. When you hit this link, remember we told that link to go to an action method called add recipe. So it should technically come back and stop here. So I'm going to go to the web page again, hit add recipe. So it stops right here. See? So this, it does nothing other than just returning that other page, which is add recipe page. And if you hit F5, which skips the breakpoints, and now you see that other page, add recipe, and this is the only text we have on the page. All right, now let's go ahead and build the form. So go back to add recipe page, and let's put a form in here, like a very basic form, nothing fancy here, right? The form should have what? A method, which is nothing but a post. The form should post something back, right? And then you also need to post to an action method, so we got to use ASP action again. We just talked about it. And this is also add recipe. So we have two add recipes. You might wonder, say, hey, we already have an add recipe. Why do you want to add another one? Because this is for the get request. So, and we're going to add another one for the post request. That means you're posting data back. In this case, it's going to be the form data. We're going to see that first. Let's build the form out. Let's go back to add recipe. Now here's the form, add recipe, right? Now within the form, we want to build out our controls. So let's create a label. right? So label ASP4 is equal to, let's say, name and name, right? And it should also have an input tag, because this is the text box that where the user can enter the data, right? So we have a section here, right? So now you have a div for a name. I'm going to copy this and paste it for other things as well. Let's put like 4 of them is probably fine, and then we'll have a input. Let's put a button to submit it, right? Button of the type submit, and the name of the button is just add recipe. So I have this. Let's fix the names. So this is, let's say this is an ingredient. We'll keep it real simple. Ingredient 1 is what you need to enter in this text box, and ingredient 2 goes here. So that. And let's say time to cook. Time to cook, right? And let's also put a checkbox. Actually, we don't care about time to cook. Let's just do if it's a vegan or not, right? So I'm going to get rid of the label here. I'm just going to do input type is checkbox, right? So get rid of this. So this basically, you can also put ASP4. This is going to be he's vegan. All right, so you got a basic form here with the name, and ingredient 1, ingredient 2, and he's vegan as a checkbox, and you hit the submit button. Now, look at this red squiggly lines. It basically says that, hey, ASP4 tag helper, now this is another tag helper. This is the second tag helper we came across. This tag helper is binding this form to a data model, to a view model particularly. So, like I said, the data, the dynamic data that's part of your HTML page can be represented using a C# class, a POCO class, and it could be, we call them view models. One example of that, it came with the boilerplate code, is error view model. So this view model represents an error, right? So your request ID and a show request ID is a read-only property. So basically, similar to that, we're going to create another view model so that we can get rid of these red squiggly lines. So I'm going to rename this file as, why is it not doing that? Oh, my computer. Thank you. Why is the rename? Anyway, so I'm going to start here. So this one I just want to call it recipe, right? So recipe has a name. Oh wait, we're running, so that's what the problem is. So when you're running, you can't add or rename files. So go ahead and now hit the rename. I'm just going to call it recipe. I'm going to suffix it with a view model. It's just a good practice, because you know down the road if you have like domain models or something like that, you don't want to overlap with this. So this class only represents the class that supports the view. It has no relationship with the rest of the architecture, right? So that's why it's just a view model. So if you go back to this view model, so now you have a recipe, and you also say view model here. And there's a name for a recipe, and we're going to add a couple more properties here. And this one would be ingredient 1, and this one would be ingredient 2. Right, so now you have 2, and then I think we added one more, right? So it's is vegan or not. So is vegan or not is a true false, so it's going to be a Boolean. So I'm just going to use the same name. Right, and that's all you have. We don't need this. So basically, this is a simple form that supports the form data. Now, we need to somehow link this to the HTML so that the squiggly lines will be gone, right? So let's go back to the CSHTML, and up at the very top here, let's do model. This is how we're linking it up, right? So I'm going to say recipe view model, and IntelliSense coming in. So that's it. So now, hopefully, the red squigglies are gone. You see, so it's now clean. So let's look at the flow one more time. So you go back to your controller. So when you click on the index, you get the index page. And the index page asks you to click another link, add a recipe. And then that goes to back to home controller to the add recipe. And this will return the form, right? And then the user will fill the form, but you have to add another action method. It's also expecting add recipe, but the difference between the two is this is a HTTP GET, and this would be a HTTP POST, right? So that's the main difference. And also, as when you're posting something, you got to accept what's being posted. So in our case, it's the recipe view model, right? So that's what's being posted, and we are returning. So once you add the recipe, it comes back here, and we can put a breakpoint here. We can get rid of the other ones because we've already seen those. And what do you want to do? Once you add a recipe, you just want to say success or something like that, right? So I'm going to route to success, and I'm going to pass the same exact data, right? So now, what's happening here? So if you look at these action methods, I didn't specify the name of the view. In this one, I did explicitly. The reason is, by convention, it looks for the same name, but in this case, it's not the same because add recipe is different. I want to show a success page. So we have to have a view with the name success. So copy that name and add another one in this folder. So when you add this, call it success. Right? Now this view, what does it have? It will not have the form again because we already took care of that. So I'm going to get rid of this. All it has is, it doesn't even have this. It's going to say maybe thank you. And you can also, remember the model still exists. That means the link to the data that the user entered still exists. So you can use some of the values that the user entered in here. So for example, he entered a recipe, and we can reference that recipe here. So for that reason, I'm going to do, the way you reference is using @model.name. See, name is available because it's a strongly typed class. So name is successfully added. So that's basically all we're showing in this. So now let's look at this in action. So basically, we now added a simple form. We will allow the user to enter the data, and we want to post that data back to the server. And in that process, there's something called model binding. Model binding is a very, very excellent feature for ASP.NET Core. It does take care of successfully mapping the data that's coming in from the body to the action parameters, right? So what I'm trying to say, I'll show you here just in a second once this comes back up. This is the hard part. I promise I will try to find a better, either try to upgrade this computer or maybe get a better laptop, because this is really slowing down the progress. All right, come on up. So the landing page is fired up here, as you can see. So we expect the welcome, and we expect the link to add a recipe. So that's what's expected. Wow, just for fun, I want to see my task manager. I want to see the performance, how things are. Yeah, the CPU is like Yeah, see that 89%. It's just not doing a great job. All right. Come on now. Let's close this. Okay, now you got that. You got to add recipe. That shows the form. And then let's say here, I'm going to add mutton chops. It's my favorite. So I already added this earlier. Ingredient 1, mutton. Ingredient 2, chops. Oh, see, look, we didn't put anything here. This is the Ease Vegan one. Okay. Um, we'll go back and fix that, but check the box for now. So hit add recipe. What does that do? That basically the execution comes to this method, right? So the data that the user entered should be populated in this object, right? So when I hover over this and if I inspect the values, so mutton chops and Ease Vegan is true because we checked the box. So ASP.NET Core model binding successfully mapped the user data to this strongly typed object. Remember? So we wrote this class and each of these properties were successfully mapped by ASP.NET Core, right? So going back to the home controller, so as we know, we're not doing much here. We're just returning the success page. So if we hit F5, there you go. It says, thank you, mutton chops is successfully added. Now, how did we get this name in the other page? We talked about this, right? So if you go back to success page, we use the @model format. And this is also part of the Razor syntax. So anything that starts with the it's color coded here, an @model. So look at the difference though. This is lowercase m, this is uppercase m. Uppercase M model is used to reference the properties of the view model. The lowercase m is only used at the very top just to link the model data to the page. So that's the main difference, is make sure you don't get confused there. All right, so now we have created a successfully page. We added a form. We basically pushed the form data back to the server, and we did that. So the only thing I want to talk about, the only other thing I want to talk about in this video is maybe let's add some validation to this, right? So I just want to talk about model state. So here, imagine that you want to make sure I want to save everything here real quick. And I want to make sure that we expect the name. We don't want to get blank values. So in that case, we just basically go and let's say required, right? And let's put a message here. Error message. Oh, I can't type. Hold on a second. So the field is required, and the error message is what I'm looking for. There should be something called error message. Or maybe it's just a message. We'll get back to that. I don't recall off the top of my head, unless something has changed in the framework. Oh, it's not even referenced. So basically, you got to add the right namespace for this to work. So it added the system component model.data annotations. And then I'm going to decorate required for each one of these. I'm going to leave the checkbox alone because the checkbox is something that it's true or false. By default, it's false. So it's validated, right? So now if you go back here and you look at error, there it is. Now error message comes up, and now you say name is required, right? So just do that. And now you can use the same format for this. In this case, the error message is ingredient 1 is required. Now you can use the same thing here. Ingredient 2 is required. Now, once we do that, I think we now close that. And let's close each one of these. And let's also go back and fix that recipe form. I think we did not put the name here. So input type is equal to checkbox. And let's say not value. I think let's do this right. Is vegan and input. So a lot of times this is a self-closing tag, right? So closing tags apply for self-closing. Let's remove the closing tag. So Visual Studio gives you the nice prompt here. So you can self-close it just like that, like how I did for the other ones. And the let's do a value is equal to is vegan. Let's see if this works. All right, so now we have that in place. Now, one of the important things is we have to make sure if the model state is valid, right? So we're going to go ahead and say if model state dot is valid, then go ahead and do this success page. And if model state is not valid, right, and then you return the same view basically, right? But it'll have the user value. So it's still complaining. Maybe it's that. Right, so what is model state here? Model state is the one that captures the errors. You have the snapshot of all the errors that are part of your form handling, right? So that's what model state is. So basically now let's run this one more time. So actually before we run this, I want to do one more thing. Because there's a way to show these messages on the page itself. Right now we added the tags, we added the model state, we added the validation here, but we have not actually shown anything. So basically, let's go ahead and make sure that this is working first. I'll probably have to edit the video to cut this part, so it's not too much of a pain to go through this. All right, so we got the add recipe. So we hit the add recipe and got the form. Now, if you don't enter anything and hit add recipe, it comes back here. But the model state that is valid is false. It doesn't go inside of that. It goes straight to the view, and we didn't mention the view name, so it defaults to this name. So this one has the form in it, so we should get the form back. There you go. So one more time in action, I'm going to get rid of the breakpoint, and I'm going to go back to the browser. I'm going to hit add recipe. We keep getting the same form back. But imagine if we added the mutton chops, and if we add recipe, we still got the mutton chops. So we did not get the success page. Why? Because the other two are also required fields, and we never populated them, right? So now imagine if I populated everything. Hey, you got that, and hit add. Now you got a thank you. See, the validation happened. But the problem here is that we don't have a notification to the user that, hey, you missed a couple of fields. So to fix that, I think we're going to stop this one more time, and bear with me. This is the last part. What we're going to do is we will go back to the add recipe page. When you do have an error, we're popping the same page back up, right? So all we're going to do is .NET has another nice tag helper. So I'm going to put another div tag here. And this tag is, you can do ASP validation summary to all. So what this displays is the list of errors that you have. Remember, when we went back to the view model, we did put some messages here. So none of this showed up, right? So because we did not have the summary added to it. Now that we have that, this should work. Now this time I'm not debugging, I'm hitting without debugging. Let's hope this fires up a little bit faster. Well, there's a little bit of gain, but not too much. So this should show the landing page. What's our landing page? Is home, index. So we should just have welcomes. And then you have add recipe. And then let's go ahead and not put anything and hit add recipe. So now we have messages. I know it's ugly, but that's not the point. The point is we have ASP.NET Core taking care of this automatically, right? How much code have you written to make this happen? Practically very less, right? So in the old days, we used to do a lot of stuff. But right now, all you got to worry about is just style this using Bootstrap appropriately, right? So if you put a name here and hit add recipe, see the top label is gone because you already populated it. And if you put the second one and hit add recipe, there's only one error left, which is the last one. If you also populate that in add recipe, everything is taken care of. Now you get the success page. Right. So that's kind of what, and to style a page, I just want to quickly show you there is something, the framework that is commonly used is called Bootstrap. Their official page is getbootstrap.com. And you can see their website here. You can download their library, you can style, all the fun stuff. So you look at the buttons, how they're looking. So this is kind of how, it kind of like nicely styles your web page. So I'll show you a quick a demonstration of that before we take off. So let's go back to maybe the first page, index page. So right now we have a simple anchor. Like if you decorate this with a class that's basically a BTN or a BTN in the primary, and this this kind of changes how the button looks like, right? And these are Bootstrap specific classes. By the way, Bootstrap is a library that I just showed you. You just have to download it. But the cool thing about ASP.NET Core is it already comes with it out of the box, right? So let me quickly show you that. In your project structure, if you collapse everything, and if you go back to the dev root and CSS, sorry, in the lib, you have Bootstrap here. So it's already added to you, and it's already in the layout, which is in here. So it's also referenced in here. If you go up at the top, you can see Bootstrap is referenced here for you. So it's already added to your project. It's good to go. And once you start adding Bootstrap classes, the effects will take, you'll see the changes right away. So let's see. So now see the button changed here. So now you have add recipe. Previously it was just a link without all that decoration. Now you have like a button type of look, right? To compare this with another button that we have, see, look at this one. It's different. If you go back to home, this is different. All right, so that's kind of what I have for this time. We'll come back with more content next time. Thank you.